Okay, good morning. Today I want to talk about the possibility that we could have a very ultra-conservative government in terms of a president, whether Trump or not, and a Republican legislature starting in 2025. And again, some of the implications of the Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation. I'll also add that, Trump's own health may not hold up. I agree with David Packman that he may be in worse mental condition than we realize. And that may become very apparent even by the time of the convention, the Republican in July in Milwaukee. So it's not over. It's far from foregone conclusion that Trump will even be the nominee as far as I'm concerned. He may not hold up. But you have to be concerned about Biden also. But let me get on to that. We haven't heard very much about what things might be like if we have a very much more conservative government. And a lot might depend on a lot. It might be a lot more up to the states than the federal government anyway. But yeah, I'd be concerned particularly that a Trump would not obey the courts. I would, just like at the end of 2020 with the January 6th and everything, I'd be very concerned about that. But the biggest concerns I have specifically to talk about is that um, internet speech without gatekeepers, which I've taken advantage of for 25 years, and particularly LGB and T. You couldn't call them rights or equality or whatever you want. I'm very concerned about the future of speech about that. Let me just run down through a couple of things. First of all, I'll just show my usual pictures. Just remind you that in 2007 we had the Child Online Protection Act trial, which was where it was overturned, and in downtown Philadelphia, there's another picture of Philadelphia. Um, but just to go on, the main concerns, first of all, are with both parties, is to keep kids away from these over socializing effect of the internet, particularly smartphones, like right here. I'll hold up mine. And yeah, that's a very simple thing to sort of revert. A lot of the problems that we're having today have to do, with social contagion. I don't doubt that. And the ability of kids to have real relationships and actually live life rather than just watch others live their lives is, yeah, Dr. Phil talks about that. That I'm very concerned about. So that's a very simple thing. It's for parents to restrict when their kids get cell phones. So that's one thing. But we might also have laws that keep kids from logging on to social media sites at all. There's the issue with TikTok, whether it will be around. Probably will be, but we need better age verification. And back with a credit card, and I guess it actually works reasonably well on social media sites now. It's just that they're very lenient about it. I thought they used mainly credit cards. But it could be that in the future that all flat sites, even like, I should have brought my own up, like this one, which is my own flat site, it's all HTML, just has embeds, and it has copies of my books for everything, for example, that and so forth, or blogs, which you just look at. You don't generally have to sign on to look at a blog, for example. All of this. The concern would be that um, you would have to sign on and have an account with anything at all you looked at in order to keep minors out. Is what I would be concerned about. Now there might be better ways to do this, like using the blockchain somehow, so that the owner of the site know doesn't know who's visiting the site, which I don't know who visits my sites. I don't really want to. what is it, know your customer, like what a bank is supposed to know. No, I don't want to have to know who's visiting or who's purchasing my books. I've always thought that was inappropriate. But a lot of the argument when COPA, Child Online Protection Act, was overturned in 2007 was that age verification wasn't reliable and couldn't be done without compromising the privacy of people visiting using the internet. And the Electronic Frontier Foundation has written many papers about that. And you'll recall I was actually a plaintiff under Electronic Frontier Foundation, just because my own site, based on my books, doaskdotell.com, and at the time hppub.com, which I no longer have, I felt had some passages that were mildly explicit that could have been held as harmful to minors by some people. So I was actually a plaintiff. Well, I don't know what would happen if that was revisited particularly in the wake of Alito, the Supreme Court in 2022, and the whole idea of substantive due process and all these other things, and the Roe versus Wade falling. Are the other dominoes going to fall? Well, they haven't yet, but they might in a more conservative government after 2025. So the other thing that I wanted to really point out very strongly is that, people have, for example, compared Trump's plans to that of Viktor Orban in Hungary, the Prime Minister of Hungary. And in fact, Orban recently visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago. I drove by Mar-a-Lago when I was in Florida in November, remember. I think I've shown that before. Can't really see very much. But Orban, one of the rules in Hungary recently is that they passed a law that material regarding homosexual, not just simply transgenderism, but homosexuality, cannot be made available online to minors at all. So that would mean any site at all would have to have age verification, not just a social media site, if you did that in the United States. And there's a reason. I recently talked about. In fact, I'll show you. It sometime. This is a playlist for my video channel, but back in on October 15th, I did make a video. Are adult gay men riding in the same boat as gender dysphoric male children? Now, gender dysphoria is a loaded term, and whether it's a mental illness, maybe it isn't. I won't get into all that right here. But there's kind of a continuum. And I explained why if there is a crackdown on transgenderism, even among transgenderism in the schools and youth and puberty blockers and all the things you're hearing about women's sports and so forth, that this may be viewed by the right as an overextension of basically gender nonconformity, and it might come back to haunt gay men, and we might lose, and gay women for that matter, lesbians, TERFs. We might lose all the advances that we had won up through 2015 with gay marriage, and in 2011 with overturning Don't Ask, Don't Tell, 2003 with overturning sodomy laws, and um, and and the reason, and Russia has even a much stricter law, and the reason for that seems to be largely that in a nationalistic society, and Hungary is to some extent, there's a concern with the idea that that the resources of the world are finite, and with overshoot and with climate change and so forth. Some societies are not going to survive. So if you want your society to be what survives, you have to have strong reproduction. Everybody has to be having kids and raising strong kids. And the presence of even the old-fashioned of gay men, even as I was in the dorm in 1961. And then the publicity about it, there's a belief among conservatives that that discourages ordinary young men from wanting to have families and have date and have children. That's what they used to believe. Now, I think more recently the idea is that the socialization in social media and just watching other people's lives and that kind of thing is what discourages people from wanting to have kids and families, not gay issues specifically. I want to make that that's really the problem, is use of social media, and particularly social media. But also there was the internet before social media, where everything was by search engines, which is what I took advantage of, and even that was starting to pose some issues back in the 2000s. And then we had MySpace, and which was moderate, in its impact. Then we eventually had Facebook and Twitter, and then all the other platforms. Um, if you go back to, that's why there's a real controversy over individuals using the internet to express their own opinions on their own without joining organizations. And that sounds like that ought to be a good thing, because that encourages critical thinking. Um, and
doesn't it?
that's not what I wanted.
Or
I
what's
wanted the
even
playlist.
stronger sometimes than
Wanted the
voting for
playlist.
facts, the kind of
Um, the dangerous thought experiment that I put up on April the 16th, 2018, that's also accessible from the playlist, um, discusses the idea that we could have a day someday where individuals cannot simply have sites just to express their political or social views and present their own thinking, but only to actually run legitimate businesses. And I talked about that idea, which is something that started worrying me after FOSTA was passed in 2018. Um, so we, again, some of this kind of thinking is from the past, but there's sort of two ways of looking at the world. I think one is the nationalistic way, in which you have to have your own people be strong enough. That means they need to have and raise a lot of kids, and the men have to be willing to go to war to protect your ethnicity, which is what we're seeing in the Middle East. We see, and where the roles of genders have to be circumscribed so that men will remain interested in their marriages and in a religiously appropriate way, which is what you see most of all with radical Islam, but you also see it with some evangelical Christianity, for example. And then you can have the left wing view, the Marxist view, which is that, well, as far as gender is concerned, masculinity particularly can be very toxic. So people need to learn to care about each other in a more collective sense as comrades, and perhaps people who are not necessarily as charismatic, people who are non-binary or um, very fluid, but not particularly role models in the way we're used to thinking. You want someone like me to be able to care about them. And that's something I talked about before. And so that's the overall concern that I have about all this. So I just wanted to lay that out today. I'm going to be talking more about the speech issues and my own history with it pretty soon. Um, but I did want to make this point today, and I do thank you for listening.